Hello, welcome to the training for Oracle Replenishment Planning Cloud product. Today we will discuss segmentation process. After completing this lesson, you should be able to describe what is segmentation, define segment groups and segments, configure segmentation criteria as per your business needs, run the segmentation process, review and interpret the segmentation results, and make changes to segments assigned to item locations if required. Now let us discuss what is segmentation. Using the Manage Segmentation feature, you can group your item locations into different segments by using static, dynamic, or user-defined attributes. These attributes can be item location attributes or dynamic attributes like shipment history or shipment forecast. You can also use user-defined attributes. Manage segmentation process uses a dynamic rule-based approach to create segments. You can efficiently manage replenishments of millions of item locations by grouping them into segments that share the same replenishments behavior. You can associate different policy and planning attributes for different parts at the segment level. You can create multiple segment groups based on specific attributes or combination of attributes. You can then select these segment groups based on the business problem. Example, for setting up policies, you can decide to use cost-based segments. For focus profiles, you can use demand volume-based segments. You can segment item locations within your supply chain using flexible rules. You can define segmentation rules based upon static attributes like item cost, lead time. You can also use dynamic attributes like item forecast. You can also use custom attributes. You can then combine these rules using and or conditions. You will then need to run execute segmentation process, which evaluates the rules set up for each segment and assigns item locations to respective segments. You can review the results using pie chart and drill into detailed item location segmentation data. If required, you can manually override segments for item locations. Now let us discuss how to configure and run segmentation. You will first need to create segment group, then define segment granularity, define segments, define segment criteria, execute segmentation process, review the segmentation result, and then perform manual overrides if required. As a first step, you need to create segment groups. In the replenishment planning work area, select the task Manage Segment Groups and Criteria. A segment group consists of segments into which segment members like item locations are grouped. You then need to click on this create icon to create new segment group. Specify meaningful segment group name. Specify source system used for collecting the master data like item locations. Only the item locations available under the specified source system will be selected for segmentation. Specify simulation set name if you have defined or overridden the item attributes under the simulation set. You can then select the granularity. You can choose from product, organization, customer, and demand class dimensions. You can associate segment groups with only the product and organization dimensions to a replenishment plan. Therefore, it is recommended that you create segment groups with only these two dimensions for creating replenishments and for defining policy parameters. You then define segments. Select the catalog if you want to define criteria based on categories. Rank column will be defaulted. You can change the rank value if needed. Rank is basically used as a tiebreaker. During segmentation, if an item location meets the specified criteria for more than one segment, then this rank will be used as a tiebreaker and it will be assigned to the segment with the lower rank. After defining the segments, you can start defining the criteria or rules for each of your segments. First, select the dimension. The attributes related to the selected dimension becomes available for selection under the attribute column. For example, if you want to define criteria based on standard cost, then select the dimension as product. And for defining criteria based on organization, select the organization dimension. You can define more than one criteria per segment. You can also define more than one criteria for the same dimension by selecting that dimension again under a separate row. Under a segment, these criteria conditions can have and or relationship. You can define measure-based criteria to segment based on measures like shipment forecast, shipment history. You will first need to select the plan name, then table name, and the measure which you would like to use for the criteria. Before defining measure-based criteria, you should run a DM plan or a replenishment plan, define a table with product and organization dimension, and which contains the measures which you would like to link here for segmentation criteria. You can then use this plan for configuring your measure-based criteria. After setting up the segmentation group and criteria, you can perform the segmentation by running execute segmentation process. You will be provided with the process or request number. You can track the progress of this process using the request number under tools schedule processes. Now let us discuss how you can review segmentation results and perform manual overrides. You can review segmentation results either from action menu of manage segment group and criteria task, or you can directly use the task called view segmentation summary. Using the pie chart, you can effectively review the segmentation summary. Here you can review the total count of item locations or members associated to each segment. The numbers under the count columns have hyperlink. Click on the hyperlink to open Manage Segment Members page. This page will display the details of the item locations or members associated to a particular segment. Alternatively, you can directly open the Manage Segment Member page from the task panel. You can also override a segment by selecting a different segment under the column Segment Override. These manual overrides persist across segmentation runs if you have checked the option Retain Segment Overrides. If you decide to override or remove all the manual segment overrides, then uncheck the option Retain Segment Override. When you will run the segmentation process next time, all the manual overrides will be deleted. Now, using an example, let us discuss how segmentation is done. This table shows standard cost for each item location. This can be viewed in items table. To define measure-based criteria, you need to first define a table under a plan with the required measures and dimensions. The table here shows aggregated final shipment forecast by each item location. Now define segment criteria and specify the plan name. table name, and measure name. So you can see here that a measure-based criteria is defined, plan name is also linked, measure evaluation table is specified, measure name is specified, and then you specify the operator. Here we have specified the operator as greater than 2000. So based on these criteria, segmentation will be done. Run segmentation process and review the segmentation result using the view segmentation summary task. Based on the defined criteria, item locations will be grouped into different segments. Now let us look at segmentation process demo. First, we will go to the task called Manage Segment Groups and Criteria. Here, all the segment groups which are defined can be seen. These are the segment groups which are already defined. Some segment groups are based on item cost, some are based on lead time, demand volume and ABC class, and demand volume and item cost. Let us review this segment group. So here you can see that all the required values are already populated. Source system is specified. Under the segment granularity, dimensions are selected as product and organization. And you can see here that 6 segments are defined. And for each of these segments, segment criteria are defined. So here 2 criteria are defined. One is product based criteria, and under product based criteria, the selected attribute is standard cost. You can select any of the item level attributes under this column. So here standard cost attribute is selected and operator is selected as greater than or equal to. Value is 120. So the how we need to interpret this criteria as all the item locations which are having standard cost greater than or equal to 120 will be part of this particular segment. And this criteria will be combined with the next criteria, which is measure based criteria. So here a plan name is linked and also the table is populated. And the measure which will be used for evaluating this criteria is final shipment forecast. So final shipment forecast for those item locations which is more than 93,000 will be associated to this particular segment called high cost, high volume. These criteria needs to be defined then for all the other segments. So this is how we create the segment group and specify the segment criteria. So once the segment group is created, segments are defined and criteria is also defined, the next step will be to run the segmentation process. So we have already run the segmentation process. It needs to be run through this particular action called execute segmentation. We have already run the execute segmentation process. So we'll go and directly review the segmentation result. Here you can see there are two pie charts. So what this process does is it stores the previous segmentation result and you can compare it with the latest segmentation result. So you can quickly analyze how the segmentation was done last time and how the item locations are now associated to the segments in the latest segmentation run. You can see that 32.6% of the items are now associated to high cost medium volume segment and 34.8% of items are associated to low cost medium volume segment. This is how you can analyze. And if you want to get to the details of item locations belonging to individual segment, you can click on this hyperlink we will analyze high cost, medium volume segment. So these are the item locations which are now associated to high cost, medium volume segment. And it also provides the information of what was the previous segment to which these item locations were associated. And if the planner wants, based on their experience, they can decide to perform the segment override. Manually, they can then decide whether if this item location can belong to high cost, high volume segment, then they can override the segment suggested by the system and perform a manual override by specifying the segment to which they want this item location to belong to. So this is how the segment override can be performed. So with this, we conclude this demo flow. Now let us summarize the learning objectives covered in this lesson. In this lesson, you should have learned how to describe segmentation, how to define segment groups and segment, how to configure segmentation criteria as per your business needs, how to run the segmentation process, review and interpret the segmentation results, and make changes to segments assigned to item locations if required. With this, we conclude this lesson. Thank you for listening.